everyone. Welcome to the Charlotte Mason Show. I'm your host, Julie Ross, and today I'm here with Rachel Lebowitz from Charlotte Mason Plenary. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you because we are talking about two very daunting subjects today that can intimidate folks, and it's something that's very unique, I think, to a Charlotte Mason education, and those are the dudes of Plutarch and Shakespeare. So I am excited to have you on because, yeah, I think it can be intimidating, but they're so beautiful, and once you start getting into them and trying them, you can just see how much they can change you in your homeschooling. And so I know that you are such an expert on this, and so thank you for coming on to talk to us today.
Thank you so much. These are my two of my favorite subjects. So I'm super excited to talk about Shakespeare.
That's so fun. This is not mine. So I love that when people are super excited about something that like I don't know that much about. So yes, can you start off just telling us a little bit about you and your family, and then kind of like what work you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I have two kiddos, and we've always homeschooled since the very beginning, and we've always used the Charlotte Mason method. I fell in love with it right from the very beginning. There's so many things I love about the Charlotte Mason method, but I guess primarily it's the children are born persons, and that it's a method, right? Not a system, it's a method. But anyway, so over the years, homeschooling and running co-ops, Charlotte Mason Co-op, and study groups, and helping other families, it kind of launched me into a Charlotte Mason Plenary. So Charlotte Mason Plenary really is all about helping families get more comfortable with the Charlotte Mason method. My goal is to make it as easy as possible to dive in. And so like everything I create is all about making it easier for us moms to understand Charlotte Mason and to understand her philosophy and the method and to get going.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And you do such a phenomenal job, and you really are a blessing.
Thank you.
So thank you for all the work that you do and continue to do. And so today, let's jump in. Let's start off with the first dude here, okay? So Plutarch is not a common thing anymore. It wasn't Charlotte Mason's day, and if you were a highly educated person in her time, you would have read Plutarch's lives, and you'll see, I find this with a lot of things in a Charlotte Mason education, that once you start noticing something, you start seeing it everywhere. Like with nature
those
study,
connections,
art, yes, the science of relations, even for me. And so once I was like, okay, well, who is Plutarch? What's going on here? But then, I see it in literature. I'll see it referenced in movies. Like it's all over the place, right? Absolutely. And so really it's like, oh, well, we really should be learning this. So first off, okay, who's Plutarch? What's the story with him? What is this name doing?
Okay, so Plutarch, he's an ancient Greek historian, right? He lived like 2,000 years ago. He wrote two books, Parallel Lives, also known as The Lives of Noble Greeks and Romans, and then another book called Moralia. But so what Charlotte Mason used was his Plutarch's Lives book, in which he wrote about famous men from ancient Rome and ancient Greece. Well, it was pretty contemporary men of his time, but to us, it's ancient Rome and ancient Greece. So he was Greek, but then he traveled to Rome and started doing research into like some of these famous Romans and Greek people, and he just became so enthralled with the lives of these men that he became a Roman citizen, and he changed his name to Plutarch. So Plutarch is actually his Roman name, and his full name is Lucius Mestrius Plutarchus.
That sounds like from Harry Potter.
Yeah, that's true. It does. So he took all of his research into all these lives and put them into his book, Plutarch's Lives. And he's really considered probably the first biographer. He's not necessarily a historian, because he even says this in like the intro to his Lives book, that he's not really interested in the great, like battles and the public works and things that these men did, but more about their everyday lives and how they treated people, and that the little things in a person's life can really tell you a lot about their character.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that, he was writing about the times that he was most recently have lived it through or in. So
Yes.
it's again, this idea of putting the child with great minds. Like,
Yes.
I didn't live in the ancient times, and the modern books we can find about ancient Greece, they're written in the last 20 years, rather than going to a source of something that was more closely related to the time. And also that these are kind of biographies, but they're
Yes.
not, but they're taught in that narrative style of everything that she's saying we need to include to make something a living book. It's full of these ideas.
Yes.
So in a way, it does tie in with history, right? These are
It does.
historical people. If they're,
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they started it when they were starting the ancient history track around 5th grade.
Yes.
We're going to see these people that they're reading about, but she didn't include it in history.
No.
So what's up with that?
So she included it in what she considered the subject of citizenship. And I find it so fascinating. So there's kind of like 3 legs of Charlotte Mason's kind of character curriculum, if you can call it that. And one of them is Plutarch. Then of course you have Shakespeare as well, and then you have the Bible. And you can also throw in Charlotte Mason's 4th volume, Ourselves, because she definitely does include that in under citizenship. But Plutarch is so interesting because she says that it's really what the students learn from Plutarch about being a good citizen and about character development that is one of the main reasons that she assigned Plutarch in her curriculum and in her schools. So kids didn't read just 1 or 2 of these biographies and that was it. They were reading one of Plutarch's lives every semester for like 5 years. So they're covering like 12, 15 of Plutarch's lives, different historical figures. And over that time, getting to know these people and seeing their lives and seeing what kind of a person was that, and then using all of that information to study character and to also develop their own internal character. It's just fascinating to me how she weaves everything together.
I know.
Yes.
It is so amazing how she weaves it all together. And they are learning some history, so it's not like this is like some completely out there thing, and they're gonna hear these people, and again, it's those living ideas, right? So oh yeah, Anthony, Cleopatra, I've heard of them, right? You're gonna get them, and you're gonna be like, oh yeah, okay. And you can Brutus, for instance, and you're gonna start tying those together, which is really cool. But then it also gives you something to kind of, when you meet those people in history, something about their character as well. But it's not like it's supposed to always line up, right? It's the idea of reading about a historical person and seeing into them as a human being, not just here's what this ruler did and this year, blah blah blah.
And also applying it to our modern day lives and our own lives. Some of the lessons that you meet in Plutarch's lives.
Yes. And I love that too, just about living books in general. Some of the other books we use for history, my kids will ask me, well, I thought he was a good person, but he just did blah 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 blah. That's not the right thing to do. I'm like, well, are people all good or all bad? And we have these discussions with our history, but because they're used to having them in citizenship and in Bible and other things as well, it makes them think about people differently than, like I said, if you're just reading a paragraph about some person, you don't understand them as a whole. So it goes back again,
Exactly.
like you were saying, to the children are born persons.
Yes.
That's before we got on the call though, but seeing everyone that we're learning about through that lens is really neat too. So so we've talked a little bit about this character. So would you say that's like the main benefit of doing Plutarch as opposed to something else for citizenship, or how would you describe it? Why we should be studying this or reading these books?
Yeah, well, it's really, I mean, there are historical components and things that are important for just us as citizens to know, but it's really about character. And I think a lot of families don't realize that
Yes.
Plutarch is about character. And so I just, I love it so much. And I just want to encourage families to give it a try. And that's part of why I write the Plutarch guides at A Charlotte Mason Plenary, is to make it a little bit easier for people to jump in and not be so intimidated
Yes.
by starting Plutarch.
Yeah, I'm going to show them this if someone's watching on the video, but if you're listening to on the podcast, you can, I'll have it in the show notes. But so this is your guide on Publica, and this is the one she recommends to start with, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I love, okay, so I'm just gonna show everyone. So this is lesson 8. Okay. It is 2 pages long. Yeah. Not even 2 full pages, right? So it's like, oh my gosh, this is so intimidating. We never could do this. It's going to take so much time. That's like,
it's definitely doable.
Yeah. And that you, because it's annotated, I'm not having to look up all these people, all these places, yes. and 2 pages, I can read this ahead of time and make sure yes. I kind of understand this before I read it. But it's very doable, and it's in these small little sections. And I love also that you have discussion questions too. So I think this is something that can kind of throw people off. They're like, some people just give their kid Plutarch and be like, okay, read these so many pages and then come back and narrate it to me. And the kid's like, the world, Charlotte Mason would have the teachers reading this even to the older kids, and then they would narrate, but then after that they do have questions. And I think some people are like, oh, Charlotte Mason, we can't have any questions. It's like, no, the point of this is the discussion, because you are yes. talking about character and morality, and you can't yes.
you have it's the grand discussion. Yeah, the grand discussion that is so fabulous with some of these harder subjects like Plutarch and Shakespeare. It's yeah. especially when you get into the teenage years, and then you start having these incredible conversations yes. yeah. that stem from the readings. Yes.
Yeah, it makes it priceless. But I love that you broke it down and use, obviously he didn't write it in English, right? So we all of us have to use a translation. We got to pick something. Right. But right. Yours, I feel like, is very accessible.
Yes. So I teach a Plutarch class in our local CM co-op, and I teach it now at our online CM co-op that we have at the plenary. But okay. When I first started teaching Plutarch, we did use the North translation, and everybody says to use the North translation, by Thomas North. And Thomas North, first of all, is a translation of a translation, so it's not necessarily a great source. He took a French translation and translated it into English way back in the 1500s. And so when we were using the North translation, my kids had like deer in the headlight looks, right. Like I have no idea what's going on. And really, if you're reading Plutarch, especially for the reasons that we've talked about here, character, yeah. citizenship, and those things, if you're reading Plutarch and you don't understand it, what is the point?
Right.
It's just, you're just clocking time, and the kids were not getting anything out of it. They didn't like it. They just didn't get it. And I love it so much that I was like, okay, well, what can I do to help? And so I started looking for other translations. And that's when I came across the Long and Stewart translation, which is primarily what I use for my Plutarch guide. So I mean, so George Long and Aubrey Stewart, they're still like, in the 1800s. So the language still stretches a student, but
Mhm.
it's not so difficult. And it's a
Yeah,
direct translation from the Greek.
yeah.
So, so it makes it a lot more accurate as well.
Mm.
But so when I switched to that translation and then I started, helping with the annotations and stuff, all of a sudden Plutarch just came to life
Yeah.
for my students. And
Mm.
now we were having those great discussions and, they enjoyed it. They looked forward to it finally because, that's what I wanted was
Yeah,
I want them to love it as much as I love it.
yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's walk through practically here.
Okay.
How do we do Plutarch? Like practical, here we're sitting down at the table. And I kind of, in a general feast, I put mine in the afternoon and tea time because it is something that's a family subject. Even she said like kids around age 7 can even understand it. Like they're not going to narrate it and they're not expected to learn it. But if they're sitting there, you're going to be surprised sometimes what the younger kids are going to pick up.
Um,
Some of them you might want to remove them because some of the things are a little mature, but
I
like,
was just going to say that. Yeah.
yep. But
Plutarch,
if you have older kids, this is something you're going to do together. So it's not like, here's your Plutarch book, go do this and come back. It's something to do together. So that's kind of how I schedule it with either Plutarch or Shakespeare in the afternoon, because then we can do it all together. And it,
yeah.
anyway, okay, so we're sitting down. What do you recommend?
Well, I mean, really, I just jump in, read read the lesson for the day. And so the way I schedule it in my home and in my co-op classes is I actually do 2 lessons every other week.
Okay.
So it's kind of like how you do like artist study or you
Yeah,
do
right.
composer study. It's like every other week. And most of my Plutarch books have 12 lessons. So if you do 2 in one sitting every other week, you're good.
Yeah.
Um, so we just sit down and like you said, you can read ahead of time if you want and go over all the annotations and the discussion questions. And then when you sit down with your kids, I like to have the kids take turns and read, a couple paragraphs, and then I'll stop them and I say, okay, so what happened there?
Yeah. Right.
And make sure they're understanding and following the story. And if they're not, then we discuss it. Okay, well, let's dissect it a little bit. Let's find
Yeah.
out what is going on, and then just keep going that way and read the whole lesson, and then talk about the discussion questions and even some of the annotations. I find really, really fascinating how they connect, and um, the background information as well, I think is really important.
Do you
So,
do the background information like as you're reading it, or would you do that ahead of time, like at the beginning of the lesson? Like,
so in my Plutarch books, the first lesson and the last lesson are always wrap ups, or intros and wrap ups. So those parts are, excuse me, so those parts are written by me, whereas lessons 2 through 11 are written by Plutarch.
okay.
So I give you the background information
Yeah.
in the first
Yeah.
lesson in the introduction, and then in the last lesson, I kind of wrap it up and I tie it to modern day events, and give you something to tie it to
Yeah.
your own life, students'
Mm.
current times.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Do you ever write the names of the people or places like on a board or somewhere for them to see?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're going to prepping the lesson, especially with teenagers, I have them prep the lesson kind of themselves. So
Yeah.
they'll
Right.
write out the names and,
Yeah.
um, locations and things like that so that they can easily refer to who they're talking about and
Yeah.
where they're talking
Yeah.
about in their
This
narrations.
dude was at that place, and yeah.
Yes.
Give me
um,
some names here. Yeah, that helps. Yeah.
but like you said, the lessons are short, and the reason for that, and you also talked about how Charlotte Mason would have the teachers read Plutarch to the students, and that is because you don't want to read an original Plutarch. There's a lot of adult
Yes.
information in Plutarch. And so Charlotte Mason used specially edited and printed guides just for her students, where the material was edited so that it's all suitable.
Mhm.
And it was also edited for length. So that's also what I do with the Plutarch guides, is edit for length and content.
That's good. So the parent isn't going to be like, oh, what am I going to
Yes.
get to? What am I going to get to this week? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And
That's
even
good.
with that, there's still mature information in Plutarch. So you are going to encounter mature situations. And that is really where a lot of those great discussions come from, about what's right and wrong, and you know, what's happening in the story.
Yeah. I love that. All right. So around 5th grade, they could start. Do you find, like, what would you recommend? Okay, we're starting with Publica. Is this appropriate for that age then? Or is there things in here even that you would have to kind of edit out or talk through? Or is it kind of like what your kid, I don't want to say has been exposed to, but kind of understands about some things? Does this make sense?
I think it definitely depends on your child's maturity level.
That's what I'm asking. Yes.
I know that Charlotte started her kids in 5th grade about, you know, I personally think that's a little too young.
Okay, me too. That's good.
Yeah. Okay, good. So yes, we're living in different times. And so I personally think that 13 is a little bit more appropriate for starting Plutarch.
Yeah, Form 3 is usually what I
Form 3
comfortable with. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool that we're on the same page. So do you have any last minute thoughts or advice on Plutarch before we keep going here?
Let me look over my notes. Well, I mean, you touched on a little bit before that so many people have read Plutarch's lives over the centuries, and you know, important people, you know, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Ralph Waldo Emerson, and you know, people that took the stories and the ideas and the lessons in Plutarch and infused it in their own writings and ideas and character.
Yeah.
And you know, we should pay attention to that these people that had such great contributions to our society thought it was important. Charlotte Mason thought it was important. So we need to take a look and see, you know, how it can also play a role and be important in our lives and in our students' lives. And then the other thing, just about making Plutarch easier and more accessible. In my research, when I write the guides, I come across these wonderful artist illustrations of the stories in Plutarch's lives. So I create picture studies for each one of the guides. Yeah, and
I'm a very visual learner.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Some people argue if that's a thing or not. Whatever. I'm just gonna own it. I have to write things down, even like to remember them. And I love pictures. Like, to me, a picture 1,000 words, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can remember a picture. This is what was happening in that painting much more than kind of in the content of a story. Yeah.
Yeah, and so artists, like throughout the centuries, found the stories.
Everybody read these, right? Yeah.
Yes, and they found them so fascinating, because they are, that they painted them in these beautiful scenes. And so you can see these paintings, you know, in the Louvre and in the Met and in all these great museums. And so, you know, like this is a painting by Jacques-Louis David, a French painter. I hope I said that right. My French is terrible, but this is like a pivotal scene in Publicola. And so, you know, it's just so incredible to be able to see how an artist captured that scene, and then for the student to, to look at that scene and take some inference on what's going on, and
Mhm.
is that how they imagined the scene when they
Right.
read it, and how is it different from what they imagined, and what is the artist trying to talk about. And then there's all these different connections because, for example, this artist created this painting during the French Revolution. And so now you have ties between Publicola and the French Revolution. And the ideas that span across time.
Mhm.
And it's just so fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, it's those science of relations, right? And
Yes.
that sadly history repeats itself. And
Yes. Yes.
how
And we
does
need
it?
to learn better.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I love that you bring in the picture study with the Plutarch, and I'll definitely link to those picture study guides as well. But yeah, so if I'm hearing you right, that would be something that you would show after they've read the story. So because you don't want them to have that picture in their head while they're
Right.
reading it, you want them to form their own mental pictures and then kind of compare and contrast.
Right. Yes. So
Okay.
in the guide, I'll have an annotation after the story, and I'll say, go look at this picture in the picture study guide to see how this
Mhm.
artist represented this story.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, and I love like the different historical tie-ins as well, especially by form 3, right? They would have covered all those cycles, and so they should be
Yeah.
able to kind of tie in the different pieces, which is really neat to
Yes.
see.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the other intimidating dude in a Charlotte Mason education. And that is Shakespeare. Interestingly enough, Shakespeare, for some of his historical plays, used Plutarch as the
Yes.
source. So it
Yes,
all
he
it all
did.
comes together here,
It
people.
does. I know. Yes.
Okay, so why did Charlotte Mason include Shakespeare, do you think, and why is that still something we should be doing in our modern times when people are like, oh, Shakespeare, that's irrelevant, right?
No, Shakespeare's so relevant. Oh my
I know.
goodness, I love Shakespeare. And
I'm
really,
being facetious. I just like to poke it.
you see Shakespeare everywhere. And
Mhm.
if you've not studied his plays, you don't realize that you're
Yep.
seeing Shakespeare everywhere, and that you're talking Shakespeare, even phrases that we use.
I know, it's
And
amazing.
yeah, it really is. He added so much to the English language. But so again, it comes back to character. Um, Charlotte Mason used Plutarch and Shakespeare as part of her character building curriculum. And the reason that we read Shakespeare is because Shakespeare is like a win. So it's been said that Shakespeare's like a window into men's souls.
Mhm.
He gets so direct into a person's um, character and motive, and shows that to his audience so well that it really um, becomes an exercise in learning about what motivates, um, consequences, all sorts of things that come into learning about character.
I think she doesn't put it under citizenship though. She puts it
She
under
doesn't.
literature,
It is
right?
under literature.
But
Yeah.
it's this, again, these ideas
Yes.
that go from multiple streams here. And it's not this compartmentalized, here's the subject, and here's this thing we're learning over here. No, it's all these ideas translate among multiple subjects. So if you're
Yeah.
reading Plutarch and you're learning how to, or reading other great books, right? And you're learning about a person, a real person, not just a little bit about them. You're seeing the good, the bad, their whole life. You develop this ability, right, to have these kind of discussions and think through, why did they do that and what motivated them, and is that a good thing, is that a bad thing, what's the consequence of that? And so again, you see that in Shakespeare, it kind of translates over to that as well. So do you think it was more of this character, or also the language and the learning of literary styles as well, I guess?
Well, that obviously comes with studying Shakespeare, but I um, I really I really feel like it's more about allowing a student to self-educate on matters of right and wrong,
Yep.
allowing them or giving them these informing ideas that
Yes.
Charlotte Mason talks about, the informing ideas, and that are so important that then those ideas help to shape their own character.
Right.
And so we see these kinds of informing ideas in Plutarch and in Shakespeare, and obviously in other books, literature and history and stuff. But I think it's very telling that Charlotte Mason scheduled Shakespeare and Plutarch every single term
Right.
for like 5 years.
Yeah.
So there's something that she thought was very important about these two subjects, that we need to do them, every term for 4 or 5 years.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you're so right about, this is, you see Shakespeare everywhere, and it has influenced music and art and literature and movies and, so many things, that if you you don't realize it till you start learning some of these characters and some of the sayings, and you're like, oh, that's where that came from,
Exactly.
and to just, to not include that, you really are kind of giving your kids a disservice in that area, but also like what you're talking about with kind of the character development of that. So that is a great benefit of it as well. So you're getting the literature and you're getting the language, and then you're getting the opportunity to kind of see into humanity, as you said. So what would you say to a parent who's like, I didn't do Shakespeare in high school, college. I think maybe I had Cliff Notes, right? If we did get assigned it, I didn't actually read the play, and right. I'm kind of intimidated by this whole thing.
So there's a couple of ways that you can get into Shakespeare. I have some of those kind of transition things listed on my website. But for example, for my son, it was the Star Wars Shakespeare books. I don't know if you've ever seen these. Oh my goodness, they are so much fun.
Okay, I'm getting these when we get off. Yes, my son will love these. Are they translate like they're with the Star Wars characters?
So this author, Ian, I can't think of his last name, but he took the Star Wars movie scripts and translated them into Shakespearean language. Yes. No, it's so much fun.
Oh my gosh, that's
so he started, we saw this at the library, we saw the book, and I was like, oh wow, okay. So I showed it to my son, and he's like, yeah, I'll read that. He was like, I don't know, 5th grade or something. And this was before we started Shakespeare. So he had read several of those books. And then once we got to Shakespeare, he was like, oh yeah, no problem. I understand. I know what's going on, because he knew the the Star Wars movies so well that reading the Shakespearean script, he could see what was happening in the movie in his mind. And so he put those two together, and now he understands the text. So it was really fun. So there's things like that you can do to help kind of make that bridge into Shakespeare. But other than that, I really like Shakespeare's plays are meant to be seen, not necessarily to be read. So I like to pair it with like a good movie or a good recording of a play or something. And I have those kinds of links on the website too. It's all under the CM subjects that I have on my website, CM subjects, and then Shakespeare page. So if you're having trouble, I would say definitely watch the play, like maybe watch scene 1 and then read scene 1. And then watch scene 2 and then read scene 2. And eventually it'll become easier. And then, just have fun. Assign characters, go back and forth and read the different parts and just have fun, play acting and getting all the kids involved and getting stuffed animals involved and, building scenes out of your Lego people. Just have fun with it and don't stress about it too much. much.
Yeah, I think that's really key is, if you're having fun and you think something is interesting and you're relaxed, then that changes the atmosphere, right? And then your kids are going to pick up on that and they're going to feel that as well. If you're like, oh, Shakespeare's so hard, I don't understand it, I don't know why we have to do this, you're even if you don't say that out loud, right? Your body language and your tone of voice and etc. Your kids are going to pick up on it and they're not going to want to do it either. And that's kind of how I got started. Our town had they do like summer Shakespeare. And it's always hilarious because they change some of the wording and they change the setting. So now I'm not going to remember the name of the one where they get shipwrecked. Help me out.
Oh,
but it was like Gilligan's Island's characters and the Tempest. Yeah, so they took the Tempest and they made it Gilligan's Island, and it was hilarious, So we went and saw it, and we're all laughing, And so then when we read the Tempest, like they had some kind of understanding of the play, and again, it is meant to be seen and heard. We use the Archangel audios.
Yes, that's wonderful.
And those were fantastic with the different characters, and I mean they could do the accents I can't do.
Yes, it's really professional. And so if you don't even need to read the play, you can just listen to it.
Listen to it. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. That helps a lot.
I think we put all this pressure of, well, this is the way Charlotte Mason did it, and this is how it was scheduled out. And if I don't do it exactly this way, and we don't read it all, then we're not actually really doing Shakespeare. And I'm like, yeah, you are. Like, you go see a play or you listen to it in the car, you're getting way more Shakespeare than most people in this world, right?
Yes. And you bring up a good point that there's sometimes so much pressure in not just the homeschooling world, but in the Charlotte Mason world, that if you don't do it perfectly and if you don't do it this way, then you're not doing CM. And you and I kind of approach the Charlotte Mason method kind of with the same mindset that it doesn't have to be this huge perfect thing, that it's definitely a method and not a system, and therefore it's supposed to be adapted to your family. And so whether you call it A Gentle Feast and I call it Charlotte Mason Your Way, but it's the same idea that you don't have to do everything and do it perfectly to have a wonderful and meaningful education with the Charlotte Mason philosophy.
I'm all about, okay, here's the thing she taught, right?
Yes.
How can I creatively put that into my life at some point?
Yes.
And it's like, I think Cindy Rollins uses this illustration. It says little grains of sand that add up. Like we're building a life here, right? So we're not trying to like, make sure we checked off this box and this box and this box. It's like, okay, we went and saw that Shakespeare play this summer. That's fantastic. Great.
Check.
Right? Yes. Yeah, you did Shakespeare. Woo!
Yes.
Like, you get to read it later on. Fantastic. But if you don't put all this pressure on yourself, right? You went and saw a Shakespeare play. That's awesome. Or, I like to use the Nesbitt translations. We'll read those, like the ones that are written for children before we jump into a play, and people are like, oh, you're not supposed to do that. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, who are the police that are saying I can't do this, right? We read the translation, we all like it, and then we read the actual play and it helps my kids understand it. I'm thinking we're cool here.
Yeah, no harm done in that, definitely.
Exactly. Like you with the Star Wars ones. Again, it's like this is an aid to make this more understandable and more fun. It's not like they're never going to read the actual play ever,
Yeah.
So anyway, we're on our soapboxes here, but I love that too.
It's a good soapbox.
make it accessible. And we did we had a really I was intimidated too. So I'm just gonna put that out there for anyone else who's like, this intimidates me. At first I was like, this is intimidating. But like you said, I just tried going to see some shows, tried listening to it. And then, probably 3 or 4 years in, I'm like, okay, I think we're ready. And West Side Story was coming to our town. And so I said,
Romeo and
Juliet and compare them. And I know it's a tragedy, but we had the best time reading Romeo and Juliet. I mean, we were all cracking up, laughing about how like, you just met this chick, like now you're in love with her. You were just in love with this other girl like 5 minutes ago, you know?
Well, yeah, and Shakespeare is a master at comedy,
Yeah.
and making it entertaining, definitely.
Yeah, and there's always like the mistaken identities, and somebody's always somebody else. And so my kids started picking up on that pattern, like, okay,
Yes.
the last 3 plays we've read, this person was actually this person. And we used to like diagram it, because they're like, wait, I thought that was so and so.
Yeah. And then when you put some of the historical plays together with Plutarch, for example, if you read Plutarch's life of Julius Caesar,
Yes.
and you read Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar, it's like a bonus.
Like,
there's all these yeah. The angels are singing.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There's even more connections and more interesting things to learn, so I really like those. I mean, okay, A Midsummer Night's Dream and all those, they're super fun.
Yeah.
But I just love the historical and the tragedy,
Yeah.
Macbeth and Hamlet and all these.
We had a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun with Macbeth, because Ross were Scottish. So we had the tartans out and the swords and
Fun, I love it.
Oh my gosh. Fake ketchup for blood. And yeah, I mean,
oh, that's so wonderful. I love it. Yay, you.
I mean, you have to make it interesting.
Yes. And you have to make it fun. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. But like, don't feel like this pressure, like, oh, I gotta make this amazing. That will naturally happen as you're doing it and you are making it fun. Then like, I didn't come up, my kids came up with this stuff.
And my goal is always, I want my students or my kids to want to do the subject again, like, oh, okay, what Shakespeare play are we reading next, and oh, okay, what's going to happen in this Plutarch life, and just make it exciting and interesting and fun, something to look forward to, not something that everybody in the house dreads.
Yes. And if you see Charlotte Mason or Shakespeare on this, her programs, and you're like, okay, we're supposed to read Shakespeare here, 7th grader, here's a copy of Hamlet, read Act 4 and then come back and tell me about it. Your kid's not going to like Shakespeare. No. I can tell you that right now.
No.
Kind of like we did in, I don't know about you, but like I did in high school when I got assigned to read Romeo and Juliet. I'm like, this is horrible. I'm what? And that's why I include it like at the end of the day, because it really, if you do it together, it really does make it a lot more interesting and a lot more accessible to people. And again, those like scaffolding tools, like I was saying, you can write the names of we would write the names of all the characters and who they were pretending to be. Or we had like those little popsicle stick people.
Yes, stick puppets. Yes, we've done that too.
Or Lego minifigures, Star Wars characters, whatever. Like, to help them with
animals.
To help them with their narration. And
and
honestly, for me too, I was like, wait, who is this person? Like, I mean, I had to write it all out for me too, because they're not names we call people nowadays anyway.
Well, and when you're reading it, it's also a little more challenging to follow the characters rather than just watching the play, because you watch the play, then oh, this actor is this person and that actor is this person.
Yes.
But you got to keep it all straight in your head when you're reading. So
and that's the reason why watching it before you read it, I do think, is a really helpful tool, because you can see, oh wait, that actor is that same person. So when you're reading it, they're like, oh yeah, that really must be so-and-so. Helps as well. And so again, it's, well, would have Charlotte Mason have watched the movie first? Who knows, right? And I don't really care. Like, we live in fun, but we have these tools, so let's use them, right?
Yeah, I think she would have been a big proponent of some of the technology advances that we have today, and she would have been all over.
I think so.
Some of the things that we have, and she even talked about in one of her volumes about this brand new invention that records sound and you can play it back, and she was just so impressed with that. Yes.
Well, I mean, it was revolutionary, right, for them.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, so do you have a favorite Charlotte Mason quote, or a quote that relates to kind of what we've been talking about, that you'd like to share with us?
This first quote comes from volume 6, and it's talking about character and why, character is so important. So she says, We who teach, right? That's us. We who teach should make it clear to ourselves that our aim in education is less conduct than character. Conduct may be arrived at, as we have seen, by indirect routes, but it is of value to the world only as it has its source in character. I just love that quote, that, we're not necessarily teaching our kids, about facts and figures and information. That all of that is a tool to an end, and that is helping them to become good persons. And that character is really our aim in education, not conduct or information. Yes. And then my favorite quote of all time from Charlotte Mason comes from volume 3, and it might be your favorite quote too. I know it is a lot of, I know, I love it. She says, the question is not how much does the youth know when he has finished his education, but how much does he care? And about how many orders of things does he care? In fact, how large is the room in which he finds his feet set? And therefore, how full is the life he has before him? And I just get goosebumps every time I read that quote, because again, that is our aim in home educating our children, that we want them to have these full lives that have meaning and purpose, and a higher calling. And that's why we're homeschooling. It's not for the stuff and the things and the info. It's for our kids to have a full and fulfilling life.
Yes, absolutely. Can I read this other quote that you have on here? Because I really like it.
Okay, yes.
From volume 6, page 137. I think it really ties into kind of what we've been saying, so it's a good way to close this. But the ordering of the will is not an affair of sudden resolve, is the outcome of a slow and ordered education in which precept and example flow in from the lives and thoughts of other men of antiquity, and I would like to put women too, men and women of the hour, as unconsciously and spontaneously as the air we breathe. And again, so it goes back to, Shakespeare and Plutarch here, that it's not just the life that you're saying that we're creating, that where they have this magnanimous personality, right?
Yes.
Is because of the slow and steady progress, like those little grains of sand. So you go see that Shakespeare play, you read that Plutarch's life. It might take you the whole year to read one life.
And that's okay.
More than anybody else has, right? Like you're adding these little bits to what they're learning. And I love that it is unconscious. A lot of that time, these ideas that we're putting into their heads through these lives that we're reading about and these people that we're reading about, we don't see the fruit of that idea sometimes for years. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, that reminds me of blah, blah, blah. And you're like, what? I was like, yes. But it's slowly shaping a person too. And you can't see that. That doesn't happen outwardly. It's that inward working that they're doing. So, and it's as spontaneous as the air we breathe. It's, again, like she says, education is an atmosphere. So you're changing the atmosphere of your whole life, of your home, not just this education school part that we're trying to check off all these boxes, right? We're really shaping this whole person. So, yay! Woo! Love it. So thank you so much, Rachel. You're amazing. And
thank you.
We'll link to all these things so that people can find your Plutarch guide and these Shakespeare helps that you have. But thank you for breaking it down and making it really practical and I think exciting for everyone.
Good. I hope so. I want everybody to love Shakespeare and Plutarch.
Yay. All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.